Hello and welcome to iBluairJgR Gaming for Comedy. This is a Stalker Tank discussion. We are going to talk about everything Stalker Tank, from the runes, to the amps, to the skills, and even a little bit of the gameplay and how it works, how the Stalker Tank feels, what it's supposed to do, what I think it's supposed to do. And we're going to get into it, and we're going to start off at the rune crafting station. So let's poof over there. Boom, that is the magic of editing. Okay, so we're at the rune crafting station for the exiles. You'll find it in the Academy corner section. If you're a Dominion, I don't know where that shit is. Yon. I can't help you with that. But if you're an exile, this is where you find it. This is where you go to make your runes, to equip your runes, to browse through the different runes that are available to you. It's really cool, so let's check it out. So you just hit level 50 and you're like, what do I do? There's so much to look at. Well, let's start with the basic runes. Basic runes are just that. They're basic runes. They give you raw stat increases. Each rune has a different tier. The different tiers of runes can be equipped in certain levels of gear. Like, you can't put a super powerful rune in some crap you got right after you hit level 50, right? You gotta put certain tiers of runes in certain tiers of gear. If you just mouse over the rune, it'll tell you all the information you need to know. I'm not gonna blather on about all the specifics. In addition to the basic runes with the stat increases, you can also create basic fusion runes. Those can go into specific pieces of gear to give you special effects, like every time you crit, you deal some bonus damage, or you get some extra crit chance when you crit, or whatever. There's so many of them. And you can kind of do what you want with them. You can experiment and tailor your character however you want. There's no... Well, there's a best way to do everything, but you can have fun with it. You can create and tailor your character how you want. And to be honest, it's not going to hurt you to experiment with these things. It's only going to be fun. Next up is where things start to get a little bit complicated. It's the rune sets. Now, these are what you put in your gear when you're trying to make yourself like the big boss on campus. You get rune sets. Now, there's a lot of them. Each class has class-specific PvP rune sets, class-specific PvE rune sets, and just general rune sets that give you some really, really nice bonuses to your stats. It's a lot to look into, but if you're a tank, if you just want to do something simple that'll give you an edge in any sort of content you're doing, whether it's adventures or dungeons, start with Alleviation. It is the most basic rune set. It'll give you critical mitigation, armor, and health, and those three stats are very important to tanking, just for surviving those big hits. Because, you know, you take it to the face a lot when you're tanking, so you need to survive. You need to survive, so Alleviation, that's really helpful. Before we move on completely from rune sets, we're going to talk about power. Each rune set has a total of 6 power, and that power is increased through something called set focuses. Each set focus has a major and a minor variant of itself. The major version will give you 2 power, the minor version will give you 1 power. If you equip 3 major set focuses into your rune set, then you get 6 power, and that means you are maxing out that rune set's capability. If you equip the minor set focuses, then you're only getting 1 power per rune, so it takes a little bit longer to max out the set. You need more runes to max out the set. And the last thing I'm going to say about rune sets is you can have the same rune set in every piece of gear that you have. You can't have the same rune set twice in one piece of gear, but if you really like the stats you get from Alleviation, you can put it in your weapon, in your chest piece, in your helmet, in your shoulders. You see where I'm going with this. I'm not going to finish doing that, but you get the point. You can put the same rune set in all of your gear. And there you go. One last thing I almost forgot. You cannot double over on rune set runes. You can't have 3 of the same armor rune set in your piece of gear. You can have 3 unique runes for the same set, but you can't have 3 of the same. You can't put 3 armor runes of Alleviation in your gear of the same value. Do with that as you will. Next, we're going to talk about a much simpler aspect of runes. Equipping them, you just go over to the equip tab, and then you drag whatever piece of gear into the box. Then you click on the slot, and then you put the rune in the slot, and then you're good to go. It's real simple to equip your runes. The hard part is, you know, figuring out which ones you want and how, you know, how you want to shape your character. And speaking of how you want to shape your character, how am I shaping my character? What am I trying to do? What am I reaching for? What is my end game? Well, I need the alleviation set because it gives armor and health and critical mitigation. That's a very important stat for Wildstar tanking, because each tier of content, the monsters, the mobs, they crit, they have more crit severity, and if you don't have any critical mitigation, they're gonna crit you real hard in the face. But when you get enough armor and health and crit mit, there's other stuff that you want, right? And as a Stalker, I'm a fan of multi-hit, glance, and deflect chance. Those are kind of all the tools that you need. The multi-hit helps you with your threat generation. The glance, it helps you with your mitigation. The deflect, a lot of your skills and your amps have synergy with deflect. So boom, that kind of covers all the bases. The Provoker rune set is a great one for that. The cool thing about Wildstar though is you can really experiment, you can really have fun. There are a lot of different rune sets, and I can't stress it enough, you can play with them, you can have fun with them. Sure, it's going to cost you some in-game cash, but have some fun, fuck around with it, what the hell. It's a game, have some fun. It's not so strict that you can't play around with it. Sure, once again, this is the best way to do everything, but you can have fun with it. Up next, for every tank, you've got to have skills and amps, and that can be probably one of the most daunting things about just hitting level 50. You just got fit, you got a bunch of amp points, got a bunch of skill points, you don't know what to do with them. Look at that. There's so much to choose from. It's so much. It's a lot. I'm being ridiculous, but it's a lot to choose from, and it can be overwhelming. The simplest thing you can do is just start off with that support tree. Start putting stuff in the support tree. Support power, critical mitigation, those are kind of like the foundational things that you need as a tank. So start there and start, you know, fleshing out that support tree. Up next, forbearance. Don't call it a comeback. There's so many different amps that are good, but when you look at these amps, when you see what they do, just think, how do you want your character to play out? Do you want more consistent mitigation, or do you want a lot of stuff that pops up in a panic? That'll determine how you want your character to play and how you want it to feel. Me, as a Stalker, I like to be as consistent as possible, so I go for any amp that has a high uptime and a high reward for when it procs or when it activates. And a lot of those are the amps that are based around deflect. They give you some health recovery and just extra mitigation when you get a deflect, and increase your support power and all that crazy stuff. And then after like 20-30 minutes of just staring at stuff and crunching numbers, you end up with this beautiful looking tree of branching abilities and amps, and you get something good that kind of works. And then you get into a dungeon, you get your face kicked in, and then you're like, well, apparently I'm an idiot because I don't know how to build a class. But anyway, speaking of dungeons, why don't we dive in and see what it's like in there? Boom, that's another editing magical trick. Okay, so probably the hardest thing in Wildstar to do when you're tanking, for me at least, it's always been holding threat. It's hard in Wildstar to hold threat. It's an effort. You have to work at it. You have to get your rotation down. You have to nail your skills. You have to hit those skills. You got to make sure the enemy's in your telegraph. You got to do a lot of stuff to maintain threat in Wildstar. But the cool thing about Wildstar threat generation is that it makes sense. Every action you take while you're tanking is going to generate threat, whether it's healing yourself with nanofield or preparation, or doing damage with whiplash, which has a threat modifier. But everything you do generates threat. So you got to remember, you got to keep actions coming at you. You got to constantly be hitting your target, constantly be rotating through your abilities, maintaining your suit power. It can be difficult, but it's doable. And one thing that makes it even more doable than it is the add-on called Threat Meter. In the top right, it's not the top right, it's the top left. In the top left-hand corner of my screen, you'll see a nice little add-on. It's called Threat Meter. It'll show you how much threat you're generating as it relates to your allies, and you can make it so that it updates every second or whatever, and it's really helpful to maintain threat. So once you've got your threat management down, then you've got to worry about doing bosses, and bosses in Wildstar they're ridiculous. Wildstar bosses are ridiculous. There's so much to dodge. It's so fast. never stops. Quick, in your face. It's ridiculous, but it's doable. You just have to practice at it. You just got to learn your rotation and figure out what exactly to do. And your rotation's going to change based on your amps and your play style and your build. There's so many different things that affect your rotation. But the one tip that I can give you as a Stalker tank, if you're using nanofield, you have to spam it as much as possible. You have to use it as often as possible. When you get max suit power, just dump all of it into nanofield. It'll get you some threat, it'll heal you up, and that's all you need. That's all you need. But another thing I can actually recommend as a Stalker tank, whenever your innate ability is available, use it. It reduces the damage you take by 25% for, I want to say 5 seconds, and it has a relatively short cooldown, about 23 seconds, so you can get a pretty nice uptime with that ability. Another cool thing you can do with your innate ability and nanofield, when you activate nanofield from stealth, you get a damage reduction bonus. So if there's ever downtime in a boss fight, he knocks you away, and you have an opportunity to get back into stealth, go back into stealth and then pop nanofield, make it hit the boss, and then you will get a huge damage reduction bonus. And it's huge. But the thing to be careful about, if you stay in stealth too long, the boss might lose threat on you, and then you're out of luck if you don't have a taunt or intimidate on your bar. And last but not least, if you're building a Stalker tank, if you don't want to use a build that someone else has and just want to craft something unique for yourself, always remember suit power. Suit power, suit power, suit power. That is the most important thing for a Stalker tank. If you don't have enough ways to generate suit power, then you're gonna have a bad time. But anyway, I feel like I've talked enough. It's time for you to get out there and play some Wildstar, and to tell me if any of the crap that I just rambled about for the last however many minutes has been helpful to you. If you enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it? I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking about it. But I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if people are enjoying listening to it. You know what I'm saying?